welcome to CSC325 Database Management Systems. So what we're going to talk about now is a database Java application that uses the data access object pattern, the DAO pattern. So we're going to start with the main program, which looks exactly like the main program from the previous example. We've got we create a database manipulator, and then we do select, insert, select, update, select, delete, and then select. So we're looking at the database, making some modifications. Every time we make a modification, we do a select against the database to see exactly what happened. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to show you the database manipulator. And the database manipulator looks really interesting. Take a look at the select. All right, so what we've done is we've abstracted away all of the code that was in the database manipulator that dealt with the database, and now we're interacting with the database via a data access object design pattern. So here we have an account DAO. So we're creating an instance of the account DAO. And the goal of the account DAO is to, we can use it to do a select all. So we'll take a look at the code that makes that DAO select all work in a second. But it's pretty nice, right? We say DAO select all, we get back a list, we iterate through the list, and we print out each item in the list as an account object. Now, we're going to have to take a look at the account object now just to see what that looks like. If you remember, with the way the data access object design pattern works is that you have a model, some type of class or object that you want, or class that you want to store and manipulate in some kind of data store. And then you provide a bunch of methods that allow you to do that. So let's take a look at account.java. It's pretty straightforward. We've got name, address, ID, and amount. We also have this funky thing called an Oracle ID. Turns out that that can be useful in certain circumstances. It's in there. It actually becomes really useful when we use Hibernate, which is this object relational mapping tool. But for right now, we're just going to leave it in there. I'd say, for this implementation, it actually offends me slightly. Because we really don't want accounts to know anything about Oracle, but it turns out that sometimes it's useful. So I'm leaving it in here for now. All right, but basically, other than that Oracle ID, the object doesn't do anything with the database and doesn't really know anything about the database. It just has a name, address, an ID, and an amount that represents an account table tuple. Okay. So let's go back to the database manipulator. So that's what we just looked at how select works. Now let's take a look at how insert works. Pretty straightforward. We create a DAO object, we create an account object, and then we say to the DAO, please insert this account object. Awesome. And that code looks so clean. Love it. All right. Here's an example of how to do update. So this is a little interesting. So we create a DAO object. We then create a list that contains all of the account tuples. And then we iterate through the list, getting each account and setting the amount of the account to the amount times 1.1 or increased by 10%. And then we do an update, a DAO update of that account. All right, so it's a little more involved than our previous update, which just did an SQL query to do an update. Okay, of one account. So we'll take a look at that update in a second as well. All right, so then the delete example, pretty straightforward. Create a DAO. We set account equal to DAO select by ID account number 32, the account with the ID of 32, and then we say DAO.delete account, and that removes the account. All right. So as you can see, at the database manipulator level, the code that manipulates data in the data store is very clear, and I think it's really easy to understand, and there's not a lot of database stuff added to it. So it really looks like you're doing object-oriented programming. All right, let's take a look at the account DAO itself. So the goal of the account DAO is to encapsulate all of the complexity of working with the database in one class, so that all the classes that are above the DAO don't have to worry about how stuff actually gets stored in the data store. So let's take a look at SelectAll. So SelectAll sets up a result set of an array list of objects. We connect to the database. That code's exactly the same as the code in the previous database manipulator we looked at with the database console as class project. Create a statement, do the execute query, select star from account, and we do the same result set.next, but this time what we're doing is, as we gather each tuple, we're doing a result.add to add new accounts to the new account objects to the results that are being returned. Now there's some simplification in here. For example, I am making an assumption in this that IDs are never null right here, and I'm also making an assumption that doubles are never null, that the amount is never null. So I probably have to check that if I wanted to make it a more robust application. When I'm done with all of this, I've got my accounts, I'm going to do result set.close, statement.close, and I'm going to, very important, disconnect from the database, because I never know when the DAO is going to be used again. All right, let's take a look at select by ID. So this looks almost exactly like the select all statement. There's a lot of code in here. We connect to the database, we do a create statement, we say select star from account where ID equals string dot value of ID. So we're converting that ID here to a string. And then we get we're expecting to get a single tuple. So we say if result set.next, indicating that we did get a tuple, then we'll grab that tuple's name, address, ID, and amount, create a new account, and set result to that new account object with the data that was free from the database. Otherwise, we're going to say, hey, there's an error. Account DAO did not return a tuple. And then clean up by doing result set.close, statement.close, and disconnect from database. All right, so let's select by ID. All right, let's take a look at update. This looks interesting. So you pass in an account. We connect to the database. We do a create statement, and we issue an execute update. And the way the execute update works is we're going to say update account set, and then we're going to list every attribute, name, address, ID, and amount. And we're going to list all of those and have them set to the current account object values that were passed in. And we're going to do that for the account where ID is equal to account.getID. Pretty awesome. So the way this update works assumes that the ID value in account is the thing that uniquely identifies each account tuple. So anyway, that's how update account's going to work. We do statement.close and disconnect from database to clean up. Well, let's take a look at insert. So insert takes in an account, connects to the database, we do a create statement, and then we do an execute update. The execute update does an insert into account with a set of values, and those values are going to be the account object's name, address, ID, and amount. And then we clean up with a statement close and a disconnect from database. All right, delete's pretty straightforward too. You pass in an account, and we're going to do a delete from account where ID is equal to the account ID that was passed in, the account object. All right. So there's another important item here, which is if you're trying to figure out, if you're trying to look up a particular object in the array list, you can pass in an account. That's what the object value is. And you have a list, basically, of account objects. And what this simply does is it just iterates through the list, and it checks to see if the account in the list at the current location, I, has the same ID as the account that you passed in. And if it does, then what we'll do is we'll return I, which is the index of this account object in this list. And if not, we'll return -1. So it's kind of a useful helper feature. One more thing, just talking about the DAO. All right, so the DAO is the parent class of account DAO. This DAO just has some generic methods in it that are useful. So, and also some data. So here we have our connection URL, driver name and connection URL. That was in the database manipulator before. And we've got a connect to database method, which will connect to the database, a disconnect from database method, which will disconnect from the database. And then we have several abstract classes. Delete, insert, array list, or select all, update, index of. So all of those have to be implemented by a particular table. And that barking dog indicates the end of this lecture on DatabaseConsoleAsDao.